Imagine a country where the government steals your future before you are born, where 7.7 million people face severe hunger tonight, where a young man cannot marry without raiding his neighbor's cattle at gunpoint, where oil worth billions flows daily from the ground and the average person earns $369 a year. 3 facts before we begin. 1.
South Sudan won independence on July 9, 2011. This came after 50 years of war against Sudan. 2 years later, South Sudan launched a civil war against itself.
2.
Between 2021 and 2024, the UN documented $2.2 billion stolen by political elites. The Ministry of Health received $29 million over 4 years. Presidential Affairs spent $557 million.
3.
Only 27% of South Sudanese adults can read, the lowest adult literacy rate on Earth.
This is South Sudan. And here is the paradox at the heart of this documentary. South Sudan bled for 50 years to be free. It won that freedom. Then it built a prison with its own hands and locked its people inside. Chapter 1. The Kleptocracy Famine. Stand in Juba on a Tuesday morning. The White Nile moves south, slow and wide, while red dirt roads push orange dust into the air. North of the city, oil rigs are running. You can hear the generators and you can smell the diesel. What you cannot find anywhere in the capital of this oil-producing nation is a functioning public hospital. South Sudan is not poor because it has no resources. South Sudan is poor because its resources are being stolen. That is not a metaphor. In September 2025, the United Nations released a 101-page report titled "Plundering a Nation: How Rampant Corruption Unleashed a Human Rights Crisis in South Sudan." Commission Chairperson Yasmin Souka stated it plainly: corruption is not incidental. It is the engine of South Sudan's decline. The numbers are staggering. According to the UN Commission on Human Rights in South Sudan, between July 2020 and June 2024, the Ministry of Presidential Affairs overspent its budget by 584%, consuming $557 million. Over that same 4-year period, the Ministry of Health received $29 million. That is 1/19 of what the presidency spent on itself. The Ministry of Agriculture received $11 million, just 7% of its legal allocation. This occurs in a country where 2/3 of the population cannot feed themselves reliably. The mechanism is direct. Oil revenue enters Juba, and then it vanishes. African Security Analysis documented in 2025 that nearly 85 to 90% of all oil income flows through informal, off-budget arrangements that bypass both the Ministry of Finance and the central bank. It is invisible by design, operating with no oversight and no transparency. The result is devastating. According to UNOCHA's 2026 projections, 7.7 million people, more than half of South Sudan's 15.8 million population, face severe food insecurity. By year's end, over 10 million will require emergency humanitarian assistance. This is survival assistance, not development support. The World Bank confirms South Sudan's GDP fell from $12 billion at independence in 2011 to $5.4 billion in 2024. The oil did not stop, but the theft accelerated. Meet Niakim, who lives in Unity State, one of South Sudan's primary oil-producing regions. Oil infrastructure is visible from the edge of her village, with pipes, storage tanks, and orange gas flares burning through the night. Her 3 children have never completed a full school year, and the nearest health post has no medication. Her youngest has had acute diarrhea for 2 weeks, but there is no waiting list to see a doctor because there is no doctor. Niakim cannot read international headlines about the $2.2 billion stolen from her country. But she feels the weight of every missing dollar in her children's empty faces. The wells keep pumping, but the theft of revenue is not the only thing killing South Sudanese. What comes next is older, cruder, and even more personal. Chapter 2: The War That Will Not End. If the kleptocracy doesn't kill you, the bullets will. Travel north from Juba into Jonglei State, where the road deteriorates within 30 kilometers of the capital. Concrete buildings carry burn marks from at least one attack. The people walking roadside carry everything they own in fabric bundles on their heads. South Sudan is a country of perpetual movement because staying in one place has always been dangerous. South Sudan's civil war erupted on December 15, 2013, 2 years after independence. President Salva Kiir, a Dinka, accused his vice president Riek Machar, a Nuer, of planning a coup. The military split along ethnic lines that night, and the killing began before morning. By the time a formal peace agreement was reached in 2018, the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine estimated that over 400,000 people had been killed. The majority died not from combat, but from disease and starvation caused by conflict. Nearly 500,000 people lost their lives in a country that had just been born. The displacement numbers are staggering. According to UNHCR's 2024 data, South Sudan has 2.3 million refugees sheltering in Uganda, Sudan, Kenya, and Ethiopia. A further 2 million people are internally displaced inside South Sudan's own borders. 1 in every 4 South Sudanese is currently in exile, in a camp, or on the move. That is the largest per capita displacement crisis in Africa. The 2018 peace deal fractured. Political violence re-escalated sharply in early 2025, with clashes between the South Sudan People's Defense Forces and the SPLA/IO, the armed wing of Machar's party, threatening to collapse the fragile unity government. The Council on Foreign Relations Global Conflict Tracker, updated in May 2026, classifies South Sudan as an active conflict zone. Elections originally scheduled for December 2024 have been postponed again to December 2026. South Sudan has been independent for 15 years, yet it has never held a free election. The civilians absorbing the consequences are not soldiers. According to a 2024 United Nations Population Fund study, 65% of women and girls in South Sudan have experienced some form of gender-based violence. That is not an outlier figure from an exceptional event. That is the daily reality of the majority of South Sudan's female population. Gabriel is 14. In 2024, armed raiders attacked his village in Jonglei State, and he was separated from his family during the chaos. He walked 6 days to reach a UNHCR reception point, spending 3 of those days without food. His mother's location remains unknown. He is now in a displacement camp near the Ugandan border. He is one of 32,000 South Sudanese who fled to neighboring countries in just the first 6 months of 2024. He has never attended school for a full calendar year, and at 14, he cannot read. What country are you watching this from right now? Drop it in the comments. I'm curious where you're watching from, and I read every single one. Chapter 3: The Bride Price Arms Race. But now we reach the fact that has been waiting since the beginning of this video. Leave the politics and leave the oil fields. Travel deep into the savannah of Jonglei State, a flat, ancient landscape broken only by acacia trees and the distant haze of cooking fires. Here, cattle are not livestock, they are currency. They are the only bank account most families have ever known, and they are why young men are killing each other by the hundreds every year. To marry in South Sudan's Dinka, Nuer, Murle, Toposa, and Mundari communities, which together represent more than half the country's 15.8 million people, a man must pay a bride price to his future wife's family. This is not a symbolic gesture. It is a formal transaction, denominated entirely in cattle. Dozens of cattle are required, and often over 100. In Jonglei State today, a bride price demands between 50 and 200 head of cattle. At current market prices, that is $15,000 to $60,000 US. In a country where GDP per capita is $369 a year, a man working legitimately would need between 40 and 160 years of his entire income to afford a single marriage. He cannot wait 40 years, so there is only one solution available to him. He must raid. For thousands of years, cattle raiding between pastoralist communities was governed by custom. There were rules, seasons, and limits on killing women and children, while elders negotiated returns and warriors used spears. The violence was real, but contained. Then, 50 years of civil war flooded South Sudan with automatic weapons. Spears gave way to AK-47s. Raiding parties that once numbered 10 men now number 300, armed and mounted on motorcycles. What once resulted in cattle changing hands now results in villages burned, women killed, and children abducted. A 2024 research program at King's College London, the Accept Project, conducted interviews with over 400 South Sudanese men and women from Toposa and Nuer communities. The conclusion was unambiguous. Young men in these communities are raised in an environment where cattle raiding is inseparable from masculine identity, eligibility for marriage, and social survival itself. It is embarrassing to offer less than 20 cows, one respondent told researchers. If I pay 70, 90, 100 cows, that proves I am a first-class man. The Brown Political Review documented over 50,000 deaths linked to cattle raid violence since the 2013 civil war began. UNOCHA's Humanitarian Needs and Response Plan 2025 confirmed that intercommunal violence, the majority driven by livestock disputes and bride price competition, accounts for 83% of all documented civilian casualties in South Sudan. Here is the paradox that demands your attention. South Sudan's communities, including the Dinka, the Nuer, and the Toposa, produced the fighters who freed this country. They bled for dignity. They died for the right to live on their own terms, and they won that war. And now their sons are dying in cattle raids. This is not over ideology or land, but because the only path to marriage and manhood in their culture requires wealth that no legitimate job in South Sudan can provide. The bride price is not a relic. It is alive. It is 2026, and it is armed. Should traditions like the cattle bride price survive in modern society regardless of culture, regardless of history? Drop your thoughts in the comments, as this is a debate worth having. Chapter 4. The Oil That Built Nothing. Stand at the oil fields of Unity State. Red dirt and a flat horizon greet you as a network of pipes, storage tanks, and generator housings stretches across the plain under an open sky. From above, this place looks modern, productive, and organized. It generates 85 to 90% of all national government revenue. Yet, it has built almost nothing for the people who live beside it. South Sudan produces approximately 150,000 barrels of oil per day. The primary operator is CNPC, China National Petroleum Corporation, which is the dominant partner in the Greater Nile Petroleum Operating Company through a 40% stake. Malaysia's Petronas holds 30%, while India's ONGC Videsh holds additional blocks. The original discoverer of this oil was Chevron of the United States, which identified these fields in the 1980s, and withdrew in 1984 after rebels killed 3 of its employees. The oil waited, and then a government arrived to claim it. South Sudanese workers maintaining the pipeline earn between $300 and $500 per month on the months they are actually paid. Civil servants funded by oil revenue routinely go unpaid for 3 to 6 consecutive months, per the September 2025 UN Commission. The soldiers guarding the oil installations themselves, the men whose cooperation keeps everything running, earn as little as $30 a month. The crude must travel north through Sudan via 1,500 kilometers of pipeline to Port Sudan. It loads onto tankers, where China takes 50.2% of exports and Singapore takes 28.7%, primarily as a trading hub for Asian refineries. From there, it becomes diesel, plastics, and chemical feedstock shipped into your country. The UN Commission documented that between 2021 and 2024, $1.7 billion was paid to companies linked to Vice President Benjamin Bol Mel for road construction. The roads were never built. The health sector, legally guaranteed 2.5% of the national budget, received 0.7% in 2023 to 2024. Education, legally guaranteed 10%, received a mere 1.5%. Look at the fuel in your car, the plastic container in your hand, or the products in your home that traveled through global supply chains. Some of that crude was pumped from South Sudan's ground, yet none of the revenue it generated paid for a single doctor in the country where it came from. This is not abstraction. This is logistics. Your daily life and the child dying of preventable illness in Unity State, 3 kilometers from an oil well, are threads in the same economic system. The UN Commission used these exact words in September 2025. 3/4 of child deaths in South Sudan are preventable, yet funds go to patronage and private pockets, not medicine, not clean water. Chapter 5. Daily Life in South Sudan. You have seen the worst. Now walk with me through what ordinary life looks like. Juba's central market opens before the sun is up. Women carrying smoked fish on their heads move between narrow stalls, while charcoal smoke hangs low over the lanes. The White Nile catches the early light at the end of the main road and turns it silver. The city wakes in layers, starting with the market, then motorcycles, and finally minibuses with their horns. Here is what eating in Juba looks like in 2026. For 60 cents, you can eat asida, which is thick sorghum porridge cooked slow over a charcoal fire until it becomes dense and filling, served alongside a bowl of dried okra and fish stew. This is the foundational meal of South Sudan, simple and sustaining. It has fed communities along the Nile for centuries, and a full portion in Juba's market costs less than a bus swipe in London. For 80 cents, you find full medames, which consists of fava beans, slow cooked until they collapse, mashed with garlic, lemon, and raw oil, and poured into a clay bowl with torn flatbread. The recipe arrived from Sudanese neighbors and never left. Vendors in Juba have served this from 5 in the morning until the bowl's empty, every single day. For 40 cents, there is kisra, a thin, sour flatbread made from fermented sorghum batter, cooked on a clay plate until it blisters into a paper-thin circle. It is smoky and slightly tangy. A stack of 10 costs less than $1 from the woman at the market corner. For under $2 total, you have eaten 3 meals in a city older than the nation surrounding it. Getting around Juba means using boda-bodas, which are motorcycles whose drivers weave through traffic at speeds that will genuinely alarm you. A cross-city ride costs 50 cents. This is the transport network 80% of Juba's population depends on. There are no functioning traffic lights and no lane markings anyone observes. During the rainy season, unpaved streets become rivers of orange mud that swallow motorcycles whole. The cost of living in Juba is low because the economy has been shattered by 15 years of war and an inflation rate of 65.7% as of 2025. The South Sudanese pound loses value so rapidly that many transactions in Juba now happen in US dollars or Ugandan shillings. The local currency is not trusted even by its own citizens. You could spend $2 on 3 meals and feel you are living cheaply. Or you could be among the 7.7 million South Sudanese for whom $2 a day simply does not exist. Both of those realities share the same street corner. Would you eat street food in South Sudan if you had the chance? Drop yes or no in the comments right now. Chapter 6: Beauty and Resilience. After all of this, including the oil theft, the war that will not end, and the bride price cattle raids, is there anything beautiful left in South Sudan? The answer will genuinely surprise you. Fly north from Juba along the White Nile. The city falls away and the road grid disappears. Below you spreads a landscape so vast and so ancient that no single word can hold it. This is the Sud, one of the largest freshwater wetlands on Earth. The White Nile slows as it enters South Sudan's flat interior, spreading into a labyrinth of channels, lagoons, and floating papyrus islands that expand and contract with the rains. The Sud covers between 30,000 and 130,000 square kilometers, depending on the season, making it larger than England when fully flooded. For centuries, Arab traders called it a barrier because it stopped armies and colonizers alike. It still stops most of the world from reaching what is inside. The Sud supports over 400 bird species. The shoebill stork, a creature so primordial it looks designed by a different epoch, hunts its shallow channels, while the Nile lechwe, a wetland antelope found nowhere else on Earth, wades through its flooded grasslands. South Sudan submitted the Sud to UNESCO's World Heritage Tentative List in 2017. The Sud has been protecting life here for millions of years, and it does not wait for governments to notice it. Now fly east into the savannas of Boma and Badin-Jilo. Every year, approximately 6 million antelope, including white-eared cob, tiang, Mangala gazelle, and reedbuck, move in megaherds between Boma and Badin-Jilo national parks. A comprehensive aerial survey in 2024, confirmed by African Parks and featured by National Geographic, established this as the largest land mammal migration on Earth. It is larger than the Serengeti, features more animals, and is happening in a country the world notices only for its disasters. This migration survived the Civil War, the entire war. 6 million animals kept their ancient roots while humans fought and died around them. In August 2022, African Parks signed a 10-year agreement with the South Sudanese government to protect Boma and Badin-Jilo. In February 2026, UNESCO validated South Sudan's Emergency World Heritage nomination for the Boma Badin-Jilo migratory landscape, marking what could potentially be the country's first ever UNESCO inscription. Now meet Emmanuel Jal. He does not know his own birth date, though he was born somewhere in the early 1980s in Bahr el Ghazal. There was no birth certificate, and his country was at war the day he arrived in the world. His mother was killed when he was approximately 7. His father, a commander in the Sudan People's Liberation Army, enlisted him as a child soldier. For years, he was one of an estimated 10,000 child soldiers fighting in the Civil War. He escaped, he walked, and a British aid worker named Emma McCune found him and brought him to Kenya. He discovered music, and his debut track Gua, meaning peace in Dinka, became an anthem heard on every continent. He performed at Live 8 in 2005. He has spoken at the United Nations, the United States Congress, and the G20 Summit, while collaborating with Peter Gabriel, Lauryn Hill, and Nile Rodgers. His autobiography, War Child, won 12 International Film Festival awards. Emmanuel Jal was a child soldier before South Sudan existed as a country. He became one of Africa's most powerful voices for peace, proving that from the same soil and the same war, a different choice is possible. South Sudan was once called the world's newest failed state. It has become one of Africa's most quietly extraordinary stories, not because its problems disappeared, but because its people refused to be defined by them. Chapter 7: South Sudan, an unresolved story. These are not separate facts. They are the same fact seen from different angles. The oil theft and the famine are the same fact. The war and the displacement are the same fact. The bride price cattle raids and the poverty are the same fact. This represents one system with different wounds. Every number in this documentary is verified by the UN Commission on Human Rights in South Sudan, UNOCHA, UNHCR, the World Bank, Human Rights Watch, and the United Nations Population Fund. Every link is in the description. Read it yourself, as that is what watching a documentary responsibly looks like. 15.8 million people wake up inside these conditions every morning. And yet, they are also the people who kept 6 million antelope migrating through a decade of civil war. They are the ones who produced Emmanuel Jal and who submitted their country to UNESCO while their own government was stealing everything. Real life in South Sudan in 2026 is not a resolved story. It is still being written. The oil keeps flowing and the migrations keep moving. Furthermore, the people keep going, including the 640,000 South Sudanese who returned home from Sudan between 2023 and 2024, because home, even broken, is still home. South Sudan doesn't need your pity, it needs your understanding. What would you do, genuinely, if you had been born into South Sudan? Imagine being born into the oil fields of Unity State, into a displacement camp in Uganda, or into a community where marriage requires cattle you can only get by raiding. Leave your answer in the comments as I read everyone. If South Sudan has changed how you see the world today, subscribe to Real Life Files. We are documenting every country on Earth with no filters, no agenda, just the truth as close as we can reach it, releasing a new documentary every 3 days. Next time on Real Life Files, we go to Madagascar, where 75% of the population lives on less than $2 a day, despite sitting on a wealth of rare minerals and biodiversity. We explore a land where unique wildlife is vanishing due to unprecedented deforestation, and where deep-seated political instability has left a nation searching for its future. Madagascar is coming next.